Hey, John Hoff here with Carb Haters, and I've got all kinds of little flowers surrounding me here and everything, and I wanted to go over a few of them because if you're on a low carb kind of diet, you might be wondering which kind of flowers do you throw into some of your baking and everything. Some of them are still relatively good for you, but more on a paleo side, so maybe a little higher in carbohydrates. And if you're trying to watch those carbs, obviously those you would have to have on a more of a small consumption amount, if any. So the first one, of course, we all know almond flour, and I have mine in a jar right now, but there's two kinds of almond flour for the most part. There's almond meal, which this one is. Don't know if you can see that in there. And then there's almond flour, which is finely ground. And you can use either of those in your low carb baking. That's good. Almond meal I find is good when you do like a crust over the top of something when you're baking. Like I have a Brussels sprout au gratin, which is so good, and I'll do up a recipe for you in our Facebook group, and you do a crust of the almond meal over the top. It's really good. And if you're not part of our Facebook group, just go to our Facebook page, Carb Haters, and you can find the link to the Facebook group there, or carbhaters.org/group. Another one is coconut flour, which I don't have here because, well, I just used the last of it actually this morning, and when I used it, that's when it got me thinking, hey, I should do a little post on flowers. So coconut flour, of course, everyone on low carb already knows coconut flour is a-okay to use. So I want to talk about xantham gum for a moment here. So xantham gum, this is a really interesting one. Now you can use this in low carb, but as with any of these, and I'm not sure how good you can see them on video here, but as with any of these, you need to look at the packaging and see what the total carb counts are, because this xanthan gum, for example, has 7 grams of carbohydrates per serving and no fiber, it says. However, this one, same company by the way, Bob's Red Mill, this one has 7 grams carbohydrates and 7 grams of fiber, which makes it net carbs of 0. So what the heck? I actually reached out to Bob's and asked them that question, and the best that they could offer me was at the time of processing, they do a test, and whatever the test comes out as, that's what they put on their labels. Sometimes it's more like this one, sometimes it's more like this one. So you have to check. And by the way, I have down below this video a link that if you click on the link, I'll send you in Messenger a little cheat sheet that I made up of different flours and how many carbs per cup in general that you'll have for like almond flour, coconut flour, cassava flour, different flours like that. So if you want to get into any baking or anything like that, you just want a neat little cheat sheet on how many net carbs per cup in those flours, just click that link down below. I'll send you into Messenger, and I'll send you that download link right there in Messenger. Okay, so xanthan gum, good for thickening agent and stuff like that. So definitely check the packaging on that. Here's one, garbanzo bean flour. This is a pretty good low carb flour. Now, as with any of these, okay, here's cassava flour, right? Yeah, cassava flour. Cassava flour is higher in carbohydrates, but it's paleo. It's grain-free and gluten-free. So, I mean, it's really not that bad for you. It's just, we're trying to watch our carb count if you're on low carb, right? So always look at your portion size. And again, in that little cheat sheet that I have for you, I show you how many net carbs per cup for this one and how many net carbs per this one. You'll see a big difference. I think garbanzo bean was somewhere around 40 something grams, and this one, the cassava, was somewhere around 116 grams per cup. Just remember, it's all about portion, right? And how low carb you are. If you're doing 25 net grams of carbs per day, then you are really watching your carb count. If you're more like me, somewhere around 50 to maybe 75, 80 grams per day, then you can add in a little bit more. And for example, I make a bread, a low carb bread, or I suppose you could say it's a moderate carb bread because it's not like 2 grams per slice. It turns out to be about 8 to 9 grams per slice. So the bread is a certain size, and I take all the flours I put in there, I add up the carbs and everything. And then I figure I make about 13 slices on my bread. And I'll do up that recipe for you in the Facebook group. If you're a member of a Facebook group, you'll be able to watch me do it on video. You know, then you just divide that out by 13, right? So I've done bread that's very low carb, like almond flour bread, just a couple net grams of carbs per slice, to ones that are a little bit more tasty for me, which are more around 9 grams. But depending on how you're watching your carb control, then you can do that. Let's look at another one here. This is tapioca flour, sometimes called tapioca starch. So this one's also a little higher in the carb count. So if you're going to use this in any kind of baking or anything, and you're low carb, do it very sparingly, very little. And we have quinoa flour is another good one. Wallflower. Quinoa flour. That's a good one to use in paleo baking. Again, low carb. You're going to be a little higher in the carb count. So if you're kind of mixing your flours, this one will be a little smaller one. Let's do another kind of higher one, arrowroot starch. So I like arrowroot starch, but it again is pretty high. It's actually really high in carbohydrates. So low carb baking, not really. Paleo, you're good to go. Okay, a couple more here. We have organic oat fiber. So oat fiber is not oat flour. Oat flour is the oats, but the oat fiber comes from the husk of the oat. So there's essentially 0 carbohydrates in this. Problem is, I don't really like the flavor, but who knows, maybe you do. So give this a try. You mix it in with some other flours and stuff if you're making bread or cookies or anything like that. Tiger nuts. No, it's not an actual nut. It's nut-free. It's a tuber, actually. And tiger nuts are on the moderate side of the carbohydrate count. So you might add this kind of sparingly into your low-carb baking. Definitely, if you're doing more of a paleo, kind of grain-free, gluten-free thing, this is good to have for you. But actually, I put it on the low-carb side because I don't really do only tiger nut flour stuff. It's usually just a small mixture added in there. And then there's also egg white protein, which you can use, and it essentially is like 0 carbs. So yeah, there's hardly any carbs in it, like less than 1 gram per 2 tablespoons of carbohydrates. So you can add that in there. It also gives a nice little protein punch. Some other things, let's see, we have the flaxseed. So these are the actual seeds, but you can grind these to make a flour. You should be able to find them in the flour form as well in a health food store. These are certainly low carb, very good for health and everything, good fats and stuff like that. Some other things you might want to add in there just to boost up the health benefit of whatever it is that you're making. This is psyllium husk. One of them is psyllium husk fiber. Was it seed and husk, psyllium husk. So psyllium husk fiber is one of these fibers that I don't really like the flavor of, I'll be honest with you. But in baking, when you mix it with hot water, it actually rises. So if you're making bread and you want the bread, because there's no gluten in the bread that we make, right? Then if you want it to rise, this mixed with a little bit of water, especially hot water, is going to make a big rising effect. But it's going to change the texture and taste a little bit, so test it out, see if you like it. It's fiber, it's really good fiber for your colon and everything. There's also some prebiotic fiber. Here's one from Garden of Life. I get some from Bulletproof, and I do different kinds of fiber you can mix in there. And also grass-fed collagen, something else that you can mix into your baking to kind of up it. Don't use bone broth collagen or protein in your baking. That's going to make it just taste weird and you're not going to like it. Some flours I stay away from, starches I stay away from. Brown rice flour, potato starch, and do I have another one? Yes, sorghum. Right? So now these are gluten-free, which is cool because gluten causes inflammation. And you know, some people say, oh, well, I don't have any problems with gluten that you know of. right? Not just because one person experiences bloating and gas problems and stomach issues with gluten doesn't mean that the other person isn't having a different kind of reaction. Some people get inflammation in the brain from gluten, and guess what? You don't have the same pain receptors there as you do in your stomach, and you don't even know it, but they see it on brain scans. Kind of makes this like saggy sides that kind of like love handles on your brain. So try to stay away from gluten if you can, or have it very, very sparingly. I always stay away from wheat myself. I think wheat is very, very bad for us, especially here in America, the way that we have this semi-dwarfed wheat, which is just, it's not even real wheat, to be honest with you. I mean, you can go to Europe. People who have gluten sensitivities here in the States go to Europe, have gluten over there, and they're perfectly fine. So, you know, go figure. But anyways, I kind of stay away from these. These are grains and stuff like sorghum that just are less healthy for you. Don't really help the gut very much. So I stay away from those, or higher carb anyways. So that's kind of off limits for you if you're on a low carb diet. Anyways, don't forget, click the link down below and I will send you a download link to download the cheat sheet that I have. Thanks so much for watching, and if you have any questions or you have any tips or recipes or anything like that, shoot them my way. All right.